at the time, the Zinoviev and Trotsky were raising these objections both in the Communist International and in the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and saying that Stalin and the Stalinist bureaucracy were betraying the revolution in China, was a very difficult period for the Soviet Union, internationally speaking. And Stalin says that we've just heard that Britain has decided to break off relations, diplomatic relations with China, and it will soon be followed by pressure of a military and economic nature against the Soviet Union. I must say, comrades, says Stalin, that Trotsky has chosen an inappropriate moment for his attacks on the party and the Comintern. I have just received information that the British Conservative government has decided to break off relations with the USSR. There is no need to prove that this will be followed by a universal campaign against the communists. This campaign has already begun. Some are threatening the CPSUB with war and intervention. Others threaten it with a split. Something like a united front from Chamberlain to Trotsky is being formed. It is possible that they want to frighten us, but it scarcely needs proof that Bolsheviks are not the sort of people to be frightened. The history of Bolshevism has known plenty of such fronts. The history of Bolshevism shows that such fronts have invariably been smashed by the revolutionary determination and supreme courage of the Bolsheviks. You need have no doubts, concludes Stalin, that we shall succeed in smashing this front too. And of course, it's not the first or the last time that Trotskyist opposition was attacking Trotsky was attacking the Communist Party of the Soviet Union or Lenin. Every time there are problems in the party or problems with the revolution, every time there's a defeat, they always pin it down on the leadership. The 1905 revolution was defeated. Trotsky and the Mensheviks said it was because of the adventurous tactics of the Bolsheviks. They raised a whole lot of hullabaloo about the Brest-Litovsk peace treaty, about trade unions, about a whole range of matters in the Soviet Union long before they had to oppose Stalin. Of course, in the name of Lenin now, they were continuing to oppose Lenin. And every time there was a problem, the problem could always be pinned on the leadership. If things are going well, they keep their heads low. If things go bad, then suddenly they come out of the woodwork and start attacking the leadership, saying it was responsible. So when the Chinese Revolution goes through various troubles and defeats, the Trotskyist opposition blame it on Stalin and blame it on the leadership of the Communist International. The reasons for the Trotskyist opposition's mistakes on the question of tactics were, number one, the failure to take into account the nationally peculiar features of a given country, confusing the Chinese Revolution with the Russian Revolution. And they came up with, therefore, of course, their own slogans, which had no place in the Chinese Revolution. In April 1926, their slogans, no alliance with the Chinese bourgeoisie, when the Canton period of the Chinese Revolution played a progressive role, and the National Army reached as far as Yangtze, thus extending the revolutionary area enormously. As a result of these victories, the opposition retreated and renounced its formula and adopted a new one, that is, that the CPC must not withdraw from the KMT. And this was the first punishment that befell the opposition for failing to take into account the nationally peculiar conditions of the Chinese Revolution. It's like when we used to campaign against American war in Vietnam. While this war actually hotted up and the Vietnamese were in difficulties, the Trotskyists were always attacking the bureaucratic Stalinist leadership of Ho Chi Minh for any difficulties that followed. Eventually, the Vietnamese were victorious. The Trotskyists then, of course, held a party to celebrate the revolution, while, of course, carrying on attacking the leadership of both the Workers' Party in North Vietnam, or the DRVN as it was called, Democratic Republic of Vietnam, as well as, of course, the leadership of the National Front for Liberation in the southern part of the country, which had remained occupied first by the French and then taken over by the Americans. We used to go to demonstrations. These demonstrations were supposed to be against American imperialism. These demonstrations were supposed to be in support of the Vietnamese people's struggle for national liberation and self-determination. And yet, what were the biggest slogans shouted at high pitch by the Trotskyists? down with Stalinist bureaucracy in Vietnam. And if that's the kind of sport that you want to give the Vietnamese people, I suppose the Vietnamese people would say, could you just stay at home and not come out to sport, not come out to sport us? This, of course, you can take any struggle that they do, whether it's struggle in Zimbabwe, whether it's struggle in South Africa, whatever it is, their attacks are actually on that organization which is leading the struggle against imperialism. The second example of the opposition's tactical mistakes is that it didn't understand, the second reason is that it didn't understand that the Chinese Revolution was anti-imperialist precisely because imperialism inspired, preserved, and supported the immediate exploiters of the Chinese people, namely the feudal lords. When tens of millions of peasants became involved in the mass agrarian movement directed against feudalism and imperialism, the opposition was once again forced to admit that it had been wrong, and it went into retreat. This was the second punishment that befell it. You can ignore the peasantry, but when tens of millions come out in the struggle against feudal lords and against imperialism, when tens of millions of people actually take up whatever arms are available to them and fight, you cannot ignore them. You may treat the peasant with contempt, but when a peasant appears in front of you with a pitchfork and you got no defense against him, you got to learn to respect him, because he has this ability to inspire awe and respect in his opponents. The opposition had heard that Chinese merchants were buying land in the countryside. Again, they said, well, really, basically, it's got nothing to do with feudal. It's the merchant bourgeoisie that is the landowner, and therefore what you've got to see is that the merchants are fighting for customs independence. There is no anti-feudal struggle going on in the Chinese countryside. They were again forced to retreat in the face of tens of millions of peasants joining the revolutionary movement against feudalism and against its chief backer, imperialism. And so there was no connection between the Trotskyist theories and life in China. As Stalin said, disharmony between formulas and reality, such is the lot of the opposition pseudo-leaders.